So MK says, my friend is in Kiev. Is it possible for him to save his wife and son, and I think send them to Canada, and after we win, reunite the family in Canada? And, obviously there's a lot of pieces to this, Anna, this question that's been asked here. And so, like we've discussed, there's probably more questions right now than answers in terms of how one would expedite an application for family members, a wife and son, to be able to travel to Canada, and then ultimately reuniting with them in Canada after the war is over. Well, that there's a lot of moving parts to that, and
Yeah, and
you know,
Mark, so maybe if I could use this as example
yeah,
from this guest MK, to kind of to dissect it and analyze it in terms of, is this family likely to receive refugee status from outside of Canada? So remember how I said that the Canadian refugee system has lots of
yes,
rules, restrictions. So one of the kind of black letter of the law rules for refugees is that you have to be outside of your country of nationality, or like you don't have a country of nationality, the like country of your habitual residence. So anybody who is right now still in Ukraine, so by the very definition of the refugee in the Canadian law, they can't they can't receive the refugee status because they have to be outside of the country. So that's kind of number one hurdle. Once they leave the country, let's say they flee to like one of the Baltic states, or they go to like Romania, Poland, so that's not sufficient yet. So you have to receive, so generally how it works, that Canada approves refugees um, through resettlement once those refugees have been referred to the Canadian government by large refugee assisting entities, and the largest of them in the world is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So most of the refugees that get resettled to Canada from like troubled parts of the world, like Middle East, like certain African countries, so they would have registered with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in whatever third country they have found refuge. And unfortunately, the process is very cumbersome. It's extremely protracted, like it takes years. So they register, they receive the refugee status. And so then with that refugee status, they get like, I don't know like who how exactly this sort of like exchange of information works between UNHCR and the Canadian government, and who kind of notifies their each other first. But the Canadian government has a quota for this many refugees to be resettled per year, so they get information from UNHCR that this is a number of people who are kind of ready to go, so to speak. They have been assessed, they have been given the refugee status, they have proof of that status, and now, so you Canada, you take them. So for anybody right now from Ukraine, let's say they flee Ukraine, they are in Poland, Romania, Moldova. So like at this point, we don't know yet like how they would come on the radar of the Canadian government, because they have to be referred by a large refugee assisting entity. I don't even know if there is like a fast sort of functioning refugee like office of the UNHCR in any of these countries. Um, because traditionally kind of these countries are not the countries that have seen a lot of like receipt of refugees, right? So it's not like, for example, Turkey, where there is a UNHCR office, because Turkey is has been a target for the refugee migration for many decades, right? From countries like from Libya to Yemen to Iraq to Syria. uh, so conversely, in Poland, we have not seen that much exodus of from the neighboring countries, right? Like to flee to Poland. So I don't know. I don't even know that if these countries right now have an existing infrastructure to process refugees and to issue refugee status. So
and
something else that the Canadian government can do, in theory, again, issue legal exemptions to recognize that there are people displaced from Ukraine, that they have not registered anywhere as refugees. They don't have the refugee status, but well, they are Ukrainian nationals. They have fled the conflict, so they should be able to make themselves known to the Canadian government, right? And then so then that sort of portion of the red tape would be cut.
yeah.
Remains to be seen.